11-2 felt good. Now Tennessee wants to continue the upward climb in the SEC and get back to the days of competing for SEC championships on a regular basis. We got Chase Thomas on the line. You can catch him on the Chase Thomas podcast, talking everything Tennessee football. Chase, what's going on today?
I'm ready for the season. I don't know about you, but it's August 17th when we're taping this, and we still got, 15, 16 days until week one, and Tennessee is back in Nashville against Virginia, and it's going to be nice. I would like to open at home like they have on those Thursday nights the last couple of years, but just because I don't know if you're like this, but like for me, being here locally in Knoxville and being a fan and being an alum, it's like the Thursday is like a nice little appetizer because the beginning of the season's already kind of like that anyway, where we've got a couple games sprinkled in that's gonna keep spark our interest. But I don't have to like pay attention to Tennessee on Saturday when I have that Thursday game, so I don't have to like give 3.5 hours of my time, so I can focus on the other stuff, the big items. But this year at noon. 11 a.m. Central Time. That's where I'll be locked in on. So it's going to be a little bit different this year.
No, I'm right there with you. You get that win out of the way on a Thursday night, and then, of course, most everybody's playing on Saturday, and you can have your selection of all the games nationally to choose from. I get that. That makes total sense. But and it is kind of this tweener game from the standpoint of you think of Power Five opener. Usually most teams like Tennessee will schedule one of four against a Power Five. The other three are typically the lesser games, obviously, but Virginia struggling, certainly in the last couple seasons, not necessarily looked upon as somebody that's going to challenge Tennessee out of the gate like the Pitt game was the last 2 years.
I would say it's a little bit different. Like the Pitt game, they were both fun and close, and the Johnny Majors Classic, I think that was like one that they stumbled into a rivalry where if you talk to any Tennessee fan who went up to Pittsburgh this past year, they had a great time. Like I have a buddy who that was his favorite game to go to last year. And I mean, it ended on a great note with Cedric Tillman in the end zone, but like that game had it all and it was fun. It was a great way to get the season started. And it was one of those where it's not a traditional rivalry, but it's still one that resonated with a lot of Tennessee fans and resonated with a lot of Pitt fans. And I was surprised 2 years ago being in the building, and this was Joe Milton's first start, which feels like a lifetime ago, to be completely honest, just how far and how much things have changed since that first game for Heupel and Milton. But I remember being in there, and there was just so many Pitt fans. They travel really well, and I was impressed, and super nice people. And I think the Pitt game is one that, I mean, they should do more often because I think there is a lot of travel interest there. And then, like, Virginia, I understand you switched quickly. Like, it was going to be BYU. Like, we were supposed to open in Provo. And I know a lot of all fans were looking forward to that because they did come here a few years back. And Keenan Peely, who is actually going to start at linebacker for Tennessee, was on that BYU team that came in with Zach Wilson years ago. But I think that a lot of folks are looking forward to that kind of jump. And because you don't really get an opportunity if you're in SEC country to go to a BYU game. And I think a lot of people were disappointed. I understand why you go local for recruiting and everything else. And it's basically a Tennessee home game getting Nashville here. But I'm pretty anti not doing the home and home and doing these neutral sites to open the season. So I'm just kind of, that part of it kind of bums me out. And then the part two is like, you had Virginia Tech just sitting right there. Like the Virginia Tech Bristol game was a gigantic turnout. And I always look around to see like what in East Tennessee, like we're really close to Bristol, we're close to Virginia, close to North Carolina, close to South Carolina, Georgia, this, that, and the other. But Virginia Tech stuff's everywhere. If you go to Dollywood at Christmas time, you'll see just as much Virginia Tech stuff as you will Tennessee stuff. And that game was huge. I don't know why they don't do more there. Like that's just something that's easy. Just don't overthink it. Like Virginia, just it's a nothing burger. When you're here, no one's concerned. This point spread's 28, I think, last time I checked. Like it shouldn't be close. It should be over at half. But I don't know. It just it's a little bit different for me. I wish I was more amped like I was the last 2 years with Pitt, I guess, more than anything. I think Virginia Tech would have given me more of that to start the year.
And considering how badly that BYU game went in the last couple minutes, I would think Tennessee ball fans would want to get a little bit of payback there.
Yeah. But it's also just a beautiful venue. Like if you look at what BYU looks like, I mean, I think fans just want a reason to go to different states and cities and just experiencing like that, because the home and home stuff is cool. Like I'm from Georgia originally, and so many Georgia people went to Notre Dame in South Bend and loved it. Like that was one of their favorite college football trips. Like when were they ever going to have an opportunity to go to South Bend and see Georgia play Notre Dame in a regular season game? And they loved it, and it was just this big deal. And I think fans, especially with the regionality going away more and more each year here in the sport, I think like Tennessee's going to Washington. I hope they keep that in a couple of years. And I think a lot of people, it's like, it's far away, but guess what? They want to go. They want to go see that. When else? That might be the only time they get to do it. And I think administrators and TV execs and everything else, they overlook little things like that, because I know a lot of Tennessee fans would have much rather gone to BYU than make the trip to Nashville.
Oh, what you just said in the last couple sentences packs a whole big punch, because yeah, they're overlooking a lot of small details for the big picture of dollar signs with these recent moves. No question about that. We got Chase Thomas here. You can catch him on the Chase Thomas podcast, talking Tennessee football, talking college football, the SEC, and of course Tennessee makes its move last year after Josh Heupel's initial 7-win surge. And then, bam, 11 wins, arguably a college football playoff team. Huge win over Bama for the first time in 15 or 16 years. One of the best games in college football. And then a enormous bowl win in which we saw Joe Milton come into that game with all these glossy stats during mop-up time, 10 touchdowns and no picks for the season. But then he proves it against a nice defense in Clemson. So where is the confidence meter stand for you for Joe Milton, considering Hendon Hooker, one of the more underrated superstars in college football over the past couple of years? That TD to pick ratio is going to be tough to replace.
I'm not as concerned about the TD pick ratio. If you go back through Heupel's quarterbacks over his college football tenure, they just don't throw picks. Like you just go Missouri, UCF, Utah State for that blip, Oklahoma, Tennessee. It's just Joe Milton. You talk about the 10 TDs, no picks last year. He's never thrown a pick as a ball. Like it's just never happened. And I understand it's not a gigantic sample size here, but I'm not really worried about that. So I think one of the interesting things I noticed nationally about Joe and the way he's talked about, like, I mean, ESPN had him as like the biggest wild card or biggest wrench, whatever it was that Bill Connolly talked about going into the season with the college football playoff. I think that's an overlook, or that's a over talked about point on Milton for me, because the thing I look at Milton, I think this is, you have to go back and watch Clemson. And this was something I said in the moment to my family group chat when we were watching. I'm like, yeah, the stats are good. Like he hit squirrel on some big stuff, and Tennessee scored and marched down the field several times. And he's got good rapport with Ramel Keaton, who he ran with the twos a bunch last year. And he'll start. I think Ramel's going to have a gigantic year. A lot of people's eyeballs are on Brew, and rightfully so. Brew's a good player. But I think Ramel is someone that I would keep an eye on to have a really, really good year. And I mean, he saved them a lot, especially with Cedric Tillman going down. Ramel really stepped up, and I think he's going to be awesome for Tennessee. But I look at it and I'm like, the thing that people miss is I think he had 5 3-and-outs in that Clemson game, and he took some bad sacks. And the difference with Hendon Hooker to Joe, where we'll feel it, it's not really the accuracy. It's not really the efficiency, I don't think, all that much. What I worry about is with the line being worse, Darnell Wright's gone, Jerome Carvin's gone. I don't worry about it as much as some people might, like doomsayers, because like just the tempo and the way this offense is structured, you can get away with a more limited offensive line than you've had in years past, just because of how fast everything is. And you're just not it's just not the same as lining up like you're Alabama's going to do with Tommy Rees and company this year. If you had those offensive linemen, then you might be in some trouble. But with Milton, it's quick decision making. Like we've seen the decision making issues in big games. We've seen him run out of bounds at Ole Miss as the time expired. We've seen him just make bad reads and take bad sacks. And if he's still that kind of guy, I'm not worried about the arm strength. I'm not worried about accuracy. I'm not worried about them scoring enough. I'm worried about at Florida if he takes 3 bad sacks. I'm worried about what his mobility is like, because Hendon Hooker knew to take off and was so good on his feet and was just a calculated machine, that Milton's a pocket guy. Like Milton is not looking to run nearly as much as what Hendon Hooker looked to do. And I think that might be a problem with this offensive line. And this offense, you just have to make these quick decisions. And if the pocket collapses a lot more than it did previously, I kind of worry about that, because Hendon was able to get around that outside of Jalen Carter in the Georgia game Joe's not that guy. So I just wonder what that looks like, and if there are a lot more 3 outs, if it is a little bit uglier in the game, because I think you'll still see the same scoring. Like, this was the number one scoring team in college football last year, but it might be one of those you have to watch the games to notice the difference. So I think when people talk about Clemson, I'm like, you had to watch it. Like, there was a lot of bad drives, and there was a lot of bad sacks, and there was some quick stuff where you're like, that can't really happen against Florida. That can't happen against Alabama if you want to beat them again. And how does Joe respond when he gets punched in the mouth? Where Hendon Hooker had the failed RPO against Alabama. Dallas Turner picks it up, walks in the end zone, Bama goes up, and you're like, oh, that's it. Like, a lot of guys would have crumbled, and Hendon Hooker just wipes stuff from his brain, like, immediately next possession. Like, all right, I'm going to score. Like, we're going in. Like, we're not losing this game. Just unbelievable mental toughness and able to just toss away a bad play. I don't know if Milton's going to do that. I don't know if Milton has a play like that where he goes down 7 in the swamp, and it's something that he did, and he had a bad fumble or something. Is he going to be able to wipe it and go down the field and do the same sort of thing Hendon does? I think he has more upside than what Hendon did, like, in overall, but Hendon was just such a high floor guy. And I mean, he's the best Tennessee quarterback in the last 20 years. That's going to be hard to replace, but it's Josh Heupel in this offense. There's only so much I really worry about that sort of thing. The quarterback position's not really at the top of my list, I guess.
Yeah, Chase, you make a really good point, because I see teams like Ohio State and Tennessee come to mind first and foremost, because prolific offense, prolific skill position players, but the question mark at quarterback to a certain extent, where the numbers are going to be there. They're not going to play a quarterback who's not going to throw 30 touchdowns and 3,500 yards, but to go from being a good team, a really good top 10 to 15 team, to being an elite team, college football playoff type team, it's more not about to look to see, okay, well, Tennessee's in the top 5 in the nation in yards and scoring and so forth, but the key drives, the key decisions against the really good teams. And of course, the offensive line has to work. I see 93 starts. John Campbell comes in from Miami. And there's that monster Georgia. And we saw what that game looked like in Athens in regards to the pass rush being pretty overwhelming for much of that game. So this offensive line, of course, has to perform.
The thing about Georgia, though, is what cracks me up about how people view Tennessee and everything else. It's like they're ahead of schedule. Like, being number one going into that game in year 2 for Heupel with the scholarships and just where this program was a year and a half prior was unbelievable. Like, it was just like, hey, the fact that we're in this and it's such a big deal is just a gigantic development for this program. But, like, they beat Alabama. Will Anderson didn't do anything on Tennessee, and he was on the left side. He was shut down by Gerald Mincey and J.J. Crawford, and then you have Darnell Wright, who wasn't even who went top 10 in the draft. He was the right side. He wasn't even covering Hendon Hooker's blind spot. You had Crawford and Mincey, two guys that one JUCO transfer and one 3-star transfer from Florida, and they'll probably split reps at right tackle, looks like, this year, with John Campbell on the left side. But I just look at it as like, okay, if if Georgia's the one team that can really warp this offense, that can really swarm and really muddle things for Josh Heupel, but you're able to score on just about everybody else at will, I think you can live with that. I think you can live with drubbing LSU in Baton Rouge at noon and just, like, singing Rocky Top and taking over the stadium. I mean, that there was a lot of talent. Like, you had Harold Perkins and company. They didn't do anything. Alabama goes down, and they had Dallas Turner and Will Anderson on the edge. They didn't do anything. So I think I don't really worry about the Carter and Georgia factor all that much, because I'm like, Georgia's just that much ahead of everybody else. Like, if your comparison is like catching Georgia or what you're going to do when you're matched up with Georgia, I'm like, that's just, you're never going to be happy. You're never going to find joy. And there is so much to be joyful about when it comes to where Tennessee is at, where Tennessee is going to be, that I think it's just a foolish errand to overthink that, where it's like Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis were going to do that to everybody. And they did do that to everybody. The maybe saving grace this year is they don't have that guy inside. They don't have the immediate game wrecker. They have talent, but not that kind of special, once in a decade generation type pass rusher in Jalen Carter.
Folks, please like the video. We appreciate you being here, but if you enjoy the content, at least do that for us. Hit the like button and join Chase on his podcast. You see it right there. The Twitter handle is PodChaseThomas, or you see Chase's Twitter handle as well. So I'm going to put a bookmark on Georgia because I got one other follow up on Georgia, but I'm going to run through this personnel because we got to talk. I want to talk skill position players. There's a whole lot of given there. It's prolific at both wide receiver, despite the loss of the Blitnikoff Award winner, and at running back. It's pretty awesome to consider, and I don't think this running back room is getting the type of offseason hype that they've earned, considering that these three backs have 2,000 yards and 31 touchdowns last season, both running and receiving. So start with the running backs and how you see that distribution of carries and utilization looking this year.
I mean, I wasn't surprised that they were able to run the football as well as they were. I mean, Jalen Wright, getting him to stay was huge. He'll be number 0, so he'll look a little bit different, not rocking the 2-0. Dylan Sampson's rocking 6. He was 24 last year, so folks are going to be like, who is it? I promise, it's the same people, just different numbers. Jabari Small, banged up a lot, but just a goal line vulture, TD vulture back, and just he's fine. He's solid. But I think Jalen Wright will start against Virginia, and I think he'll probably lead the team in carries and yardage. But I mean, the two-headed monster of Wright and Sampson, especially what you saw against Mizzou, what you saw against Vanderbilt especially, is just a different 1-2 punch that we haven't seen in Knoxville in a long time. And I think they're going to have both big years for Tennessee. And I think it's an overlooked part of it because, I mean, it's just we're in a passing age and we're in a passing league, and that's something that Heupel has to fight in the recruiting trail, right? Like, you talk to insiders, and one of the things that Tennessee hears is that, like, they have to sell recruits. Like, no, we run the football. We actually do. It's not just that they think air raid and they think like Mississippi State or Texas Tech, and it's like that's not how things work. Like, this was a top 25 rushing attack last year in college football. Guys have a lot of success running the football in this offense, and running the football is vital to what Tennessee does week in, week out. So it's an important position, and I think they're deeper. We'll see if Cam Seldon, the true freshman 4-star out of Virginia, makes it in the rotation. I anticipate he's returning kicks with Sampson right out of the gate here, but he is just, there's a lot of, I don't want to put like some really, really high bars here, but like there's some Cordero Patterson potential there with his size and ability and versatility as a playmaker in this offense. But I think he will get some opportunities, but this is a deep, deep running back room that I think Jalen Wright will headline and probably have one of the best seasons in the conference.
So Chase, when you mentioned those other top teams in the SEC, the other three big teams, LSU, Alabama, Georgia, you mentioned standout defensive players. You know, Harold Perkins to me flashed more than any player on that side of the ball last year. When I tuned into him during the second half of the season, it was like, this might be the best player in college football right here. Guys like that. Of course, Will Anderson, we know what kind of impact he had on the quarterback the last 2 seasons in particular. Is Tennessee recruiting that type of player? We know that the defense has to get better to compete for a championship. Jalen McCullough is an experienced player at safety. Aaron Beasley's an experienced player at linebacker. A lot of players along the defensive front come back with experience, but those kind of superstars that change a game.
Yes, so that's definitely been a point of emphasis. There's a lot of good recruiters on the defensive side of the ball. I'll just go ahead and say Aaron Carter will be a name you're familiar with sooner rather than later. He'll be rocking number 7. He was a 4-star linebacker who didn't start playing linebacker until his senior year. So he was a late addition, but Tennessee beat out Alabama for him late in the 2023 cycle. And he's going to back up Keenan Pili and Aaron Beasley. And Beasley is, I think, maybe going to be the best defensive player on this team this year at that linebacker spot. He came in and had a great game against Clemson. So if you're talking about guys who built on a good year and got just better week in, week out, it was Aaron Beasley. And you bring in Keenan Pili, transfer. He's had a great spring and summer. I think they have more depth everywhere. So they don't think they have the guys yet to have that top tier defense, but they're bringing them in. Joshua Josephs and James Pierce, 2 4-star edges from the class prior. You bring in Chandavian Bradley this class. You bring in 5-star defensive tackle David Hobbs out of North Carolina, who they beat a lot of big teams for, specifically Georgia, late in the process. I think he'll be in the rotation. Gardner likes to play a lot of guys across the defensive line, so I think you'll see more rotation there. Roman Harrison, Tyler Barron. They're just solid. And I think one of the things that was overlooked about this Tennessee defense last year was they were one of the best run defenses in college football. So you were not really able to run on this team. Yes, the secondary was rough and teams were able to pass all over Tennessee. part of that too is injuries. They were running out of corners. Like in the South Carolina game, and Brandon Turnage got knocked out in that one. Kamal Haddon was in and out. Like you just go up and down the list. They were having to move to Nico Slaughter to corner, who will probably be their best corner this year. He was just a super physical safety outside of Roswell, and he's just a big guy, and I think he's going to have a big year at corner across from but you bring in Jordan Matthews and Ricky Gibson, 2 4-star corners that I think will contribute a little bit here. They're bringing in guys. They're never going to get, I don't think, the 5-star, just Jalen Carter, just home run, like the Williams Nwaneri, maybe, even though they were leaders for Nwaneri at one point this spring, the number 1 defensive tackle edge, depending on what you look at him as. We'll see what happens with Jordan Ross, edge guy out of Vestavia Hills on Monday. So that might end up being another edge. Jenny Okoye, another edge for Tennessee. So it's not as though they're not addressing it. They've had some misses, but I think they're going to be fine. They just, like, when you have an offense that is going to be in that top 5, top 10 year over year, and you look at it, and one of the things that I pointed to last year, and I picked Tennessee to go 10-2. I called it, like, the podcast. Like, I didn't want to be right about South Carolina, but it was one of those. It just, Williams-Brice Stadium at night, late in the year, just never feels good for Tennessee. And one of the things I looked at was 2 years ago, Tennessee was the only top 10 scoring offense in college football not to win 10 games in the Power 5. Like, that was it. They were the only ones who didn't do it. And I just saw this offense being better. I saw it being a top 5 offense. And in the sport that is so offensive centric, it's very hard for you not to win a lot of games when you have elite quarterback play and elite offenses. And you see that with Lincoln Riley. That defense we talk about Tennessee's defense so much. The Alex Grinch situation at USC is going to cost them another year of Caleb Williams, where he's maybe the best quarterback in the sport, but the defense just isn't there. They don't have the pieces to realistically run the gauntlet in the playoff and then just get exposed against the Utahs of the world in the Pac-12 title game every year. But Tennessee, I think, has put more emphasis. I think they've recruited really well. I think the defensive line's getting better. The linebacker room's loaded. I think Arian Carter is a future first-team All-SEC guy at that position. I think they're getting there, but they don't have to be top 5. They don't have to be Georgia defensively. They just have to be in that top 20, top 30. And if their offense is number 1 and Nico is who we think he'll be, and you bring in a Mike Matthews, another 5-star wide receiver, and you just have this elite talent in those other places, you're going to be in the conversation year in, year out.
Why are you resigned, Chase, that they will never recruit and sign those kind of defensive players?
Well, part of what you're seeing right now is, like, there's a reason that, like, if you're a 5-star kid, right, if you're a 5-star offensive guy, Tennessee's at the top of the list. I think USC has this problem too, where guys want to come there because they know they're going to put up numbers. Like you just saw with Jalen Hyatt, the numbers he put up. Cedric Tillman, who was just a pass blocking wide receiver before Heupel came in, like, just what Cedric Tillman turned into was sensational. But it was the scheme, and it was Heupel, and he grew so much with this new staff as opposed to the last one that, like, I think you'll just always, in these offensive focused schemes and with the tempo and with how much the defense is going to be on the field and with what is going to be asked of the defense every year, because they're going to have to be on the field so much with how quickly the offense scores. I just wonder if you're ever going to be able to get that kind of recruiting class defensively, just because it's always going to be kind of a struggle, and it's hard to be a defensive player in this scheme because you're on the field so much more than Georgia or an Alabama with their current Tommy Rees game. It's just different.
So Chase, you bring up Georgia, and they're the monster obstacle, but we've got a 12-team playoff coming in 2 years, so that makes that dynamic completely different. But while we're still looking at 2023, we've had a situation in the last 2 years where 2 teams have made the playoff from one conference. So for your typical Tennessee fan that is looking for a path to the playoff, on one hand, it would have to be discouraging that we would have to be in Georgia's division. If Tennessee's anywhere else, then the path is clear to a playoff spot and more hopeful. But considering the strength of the SEC, the reputation and the respect it draws from the committee, and then also that it's been done for 2 consecutive years, is there a thought from Tennessee fans, hey, we don't even need to take down Georgia. Let's just run through the rest of the schedule and we can get to the playoff?
Georgia fans are way more concerned about Tennessee and their path than Tennessee fans are. I'll say that. Which is just, it's kind of funny to me of just like the stomping on to like how far away they are from Georgia, this, that, and the other. I mean, you said it, like the playoff is going to expand. We've also seen where they could lose to Georgia and still make the playoff. They still, I mean, last year controlled their own destiny after losing to Georgia. If they take care of business against South Carolina, their playoff team last year and got blitzed by the Dogs. So I think there absolutely is a path to Tennessee being a perennial playoff team. I think when you have the kind of offense and with Nico coming into the fold, and if he's able to sit for this full year and then just be able to go right away and you get 2 full years of Nico, I think the sky's the limit for this team and what they could be. I don't know if they'll be in the blue chip ratio next year. They're not in it right now. They're right at the border, but they'll be one of those 13 to 15 teams that can realistically win the title going into next year. And then anything can happen. Like, yeah, they'll never have the Bama or Georgia classes and that kind of talent where I think Bama has like 90% blue chippers at this point, which is like a record, if I remember correctly, and Georgia's somewhere in the 80s. So you're not going to get there, but you are going to be in that conversation and push around most teams you play. Like, this offense just has an extremely high floor, and Heupel is, I think, the best offensive mind in the sport as of right now. So when you have that, the best play caller, the best offensive mind, and the most ruthless offensive attack week in, week out, I just think you're going to be in the conversation. It's just fun. Like, Tennessee fans, enjoy this. Like, it's been a long time of decade of misery, and people are just like, it's not a real offense, or what does the NFL think? Oh, you put guys at the hashes, you spread things out. It's not. Who cares? The goal is to win games and make 3.5 hours really fun for us inside Neyland every single week. And that has been what it has been here during the first 2 years of Josh Heupel, is fireworks after fireworks. And you beat Bama in year 2. What are we doing? It's a great time to be a Tennessee Volunteer.
Chase Thomas, folks, follow him on Twitter, and also check out the podcast. There you see it right there. And anything else we need to know about what you've got available?
New content each and every day on the YouTube show. You can subscribe on Apple, Spotify. I got the website, chasethomaspodcast.com. That got revamped over the summer, so really like that. Tennessee every single week, college football, NFL. I talk about it all with a Tennessee slant, of course. But I'm just excited that we actually have ball to talk about next week. It's week 0, but guess who will be tuned in, locked in? As much as my wife may not like it, I'm watching Hawaii Vanderbilt because I need to see it. It's gonna be fun. The run and shoot Vanderbilt, yeah, why not?
Go Doors!
I can't
make a bowl game this year. Why not? Tennessee can get behind that, right? They're no threat. No. Okay,
Mark, I can't do that. Mark, okay. I can't do that.
All right, Chase, appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.